Wow. Wow. Okay. So that really did just happen. And granted, I'm going to repeat a lot of this when it comes to the live podcast recording, but we got to get live on YouTube so that YouTube acknowledges that we're live and people just start getting sent our way. You know what I'm saying?
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
Holy smokes, Nick. What a game. What a game. I mean, right. Consider this the green room, the pre show lobby as people filter in. And then they know the drill. A lot of them that have been riding with me for a while, they know that this is basically just going to be a live podcast recording in the most literal sense. Lenny 1911 says, whatever. I mean, what's crazy to me? Okay, so Nick, here's a question I want to start with. How do you? Because this won't make it on the pod. How do you summon the emotion to care, so to speak? Like, or or did this hit you with nothing?
I mean, it's not like the Green Bay game, because that one was like a sledgehammer. This was almost comical because the whole game I'm like, we really got another turnover. We got a third turnover. We got a fourth turnover. We're up by 2 scores this late in the game. And like every time I'm like, I'm waiting for the bad play to happen. I'm waiting for the Tyson Bagent to fumble and they return it all the way for a touchdown.
Right.
Like I'm waiting. And then it just happened, but it just happened in like a very, prevent nothing defensive way, which is the
Mm-hmm.
loosest way to lose a game.
Also, I want everybody to forgive me for the super duper scuffed setup. Uh, like Draco's saying, Draco G messaged me on Twitter and said, "For old time's sake, can we go live here?" And I was like, "Actually, that sounds like an awesome idea." So I threw together the first StreamYard setup that I could come up with. It's super mega broken, but it'll let me get to you guys faster, which I think is really core, right? So y'all know the drill because chances are you remember this from last year. But so Nick and I are going to go through, we're going to record, bear with us live, and then afterwards we'll hang out for a little bit before we peace out for the day. I hope that sounds great to everybody. If you're ready to go, Nick, I sure am. And we can get into okay, so Jordan Jimenez, you mentioned pain. Sir Lord, you mentioned, like, I don't know how this team ropes me in. I will tell you, as a little peek, I really believe there is a positive angle to be taken here, but it is going to involve the most grave dancing I've ever done in my life, Nick. And so I just need to invite everybody that if we're going to get toxic about it, there's a nice thing. And then I don't think the coaches can come back from this.
What
I
what
really don't.
Robert, it's almost like going to therapy, right? You gotta go through
Right.
therapy. You gotta get through the pain part to get to like, okay, I'm gonna be better on the other side. We gotta get through the pain part right here. And then I think there could be some sunshines and rainbows.
This is that moment when you trusted your partner to pay the mortgage, and for the fourth time, they didn't pay the mortgage. And now you're out of a house, but you know you're also out of a partner. And so there's no playing anymore, right? There's no maybe. But
Pain
it's
started in 86. That's so true, Joseph.
like it's brutal, it's bad, but I've been whining. Like I'm trying to tone language down because I always want to be cognizant, Nick, of the fact that kids may be watching the show. But like I've been whining about Matt Eberflus. I think the amazing piece is for a moderate person, because I really like to come across moderate on Twitter, that there's nobody that I've been more aggressive about than like Matt Eberflus has to go. This will not. There's nothing good that can come of this franchise until he goes. You know what I'm saying? And even I didn't think there was a chance.
Okay, in your most like dark side of losing a game, was there any more way you could Eberflus the game than this?
I didn't think it was possible. I was telling people, like, as they kicked to go up 12, that I was like, these field goals aren't going to matter. Like, everybody's going to whine about them. These field goals aren't going to matter. I really sent that to people because
Yeah.
Jared Goff was playing full Jared Goof. Like, I mean, they had them. They had them up, down, and sideways, and they somehow lost anyways. I wouldn't wish this loss on anybody. But if it was gonna happen, because the other side of this, Nick, I don't know if you felt this way, but like Sir Lord talks about how four losses. How do you lose that game? Well, on the other side of it, Nick, if you'd beat the Lions a convincing 26-14, I was sitting here wondering how you'd fire Matt Eberflus at all. You could lose nearly all of the rest of the games. Like that heavy a divisional beating like looked to me like everything Matt Eberflus had been preaching would happen. You know what I'm saying? Like that was one of those, this is it. This is how we win the Super Bowl. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is going to get everybody to buy
Well,
in.
he
I
he's e
can't believe it got out.
he even got to the hits philosophy, the ball. They were
The
getting
ball.
the ball,
The
Robert. Like,
ball.
this was his game. Like, it was like the peak of this and then on the downfall. And getting into just some details of the game, okay? Did you
No, we
okay,
have
so
to
in the end
podcast. We have to start the podcast if we're going to get into details.
I
You
know,
ready?
but, like, I mean, whatever, I gotta ask this. We're we're driving down 4th quarter to kick the field goal. Were you like, "Why are we kicking a field goal? To go up 12 instead of 9 or 8," whatever
Yes,
it was?
but at the
8.
same
Oh,
time, I grew up in 2005, like watching football. I've seen these guys. Like I know who taught these guys. That was back when going for it on 4th and 1 with the game on the line was still taboo. Like where going for it on 4th down at all was headline worthy. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like 4th and 1, you kick to what I could just hear it. You kick to take the positive feeling that came from the drive that had points on it.
But, like,
Like,
9 doesn't matter any more than 12.
well, the argument would be that you push the Lions to score 2 touchdowns on you. That's the legitimate argument that they would make. Do we gain anything from the field goal? Yes, the Lions go from down two, like 1.5 scores to 2 full scores. Now, side note, this goes back to an earlier decision that I'm going to whine about. And if you hear the word whine, I'm just going to tell everybody you can very easily decode that there's a certain B word I am replacing. I have just search replaced my dictionary and I
Is that what you use in the house with the kid around?
no, not with the kid
No?
around.
Okay.
But so point being that like when you scored to go up 5, go for 2. It's not a hard game.
I thought of that one too, yep.
You need every point. Then the kick to go up 9 goes up 10. Then there is no reason to kick. Opens you up to go for it on 4th
Mhm.
down. Maybe you don't get it. Who cares? You're in the same position either way. Even worse, one thing I've thought about a lot, Nick, football, if you feel I swear I'm going to repeat this on the podcast. This is good. Football is a weird game where certain positions put immense pressure on coaches to behave a certain way. As much as we would whine about Luke Getsy's play calling, first of all, I think it was Matt Eberflus' decision to run twice up the middle. I don't have any question in my mind about that.
What are we
But
doing?
but also, that's the most normal play call in football, high school level, college level, NFL level. When your offense has put the pressure on the other offense to just keep the ball, these people cave. They never run the same thing. They always basically give away a free 3rd and long, unless somehow your team powers through and actually gets yards on those first 2 runs. You know what I'm saying? It's
I
it's
mean, because
clockwork.
you knew they were gonna use the timeout either way, and you used up 2 seconds of clock, like, and or unless Herbert somehow broke through the 9-man box that they had or 10-man box that they had. Like, it was the stupidest thing. At least get Fields to the edge. He was at least getting yards no matter
Right.
what.
Right. I mean, it was there's a lot we can whine about. There's a lot.
Yeah.
But I can't help but keep looking back and thinking, okay, like given what went your way, the head coach's decisions are without a doubt the biggest pivot piece.
Yep.
Like maybe, I don't know, maybe you find one more play out of your quarterback, but I really thought Fields played well today. I really thought Fields played well today.
Well,
Maybe,
what are the Fields haters gonna say today, Robert?
well, they're going to say he didn't do enough. They're going to say that at the last play of the game, he took a sack because he dropped too slowly. Aiden Hutchinson hit him, and the ball popped out, and the game was over.
Yeah,
But
he
that's just
wasn't
like
clutch. He
that.
wasn't clutch.
To me, that's just loser mentality. There were 30 seconds left. We've seen some guys do this. You can't give that lead away. You can't give that lead away. Anyways, ready to roll?
Yeah, that's fine.
Let's do this. What was it? 26-31. That was the
Yeah,
final, right?
yep, that was the final.
The Chicago Bears lose. I can't sound that upbeat about this. All right, so
Dude, your worst voice ever,
I'm
like,
gonna do it.
"Ugh."
Somehow, some way, the Chicago Bears snatched defeat from the very jaws of victory in a 26-31 loss in Motown, where victory was all but assured until it wasn't. Matt Eberflus has a lot of explaining to do in the post-game presser, but before then, Nick and I'll take you through everything to do with this game on this episode of Bear With Us. And then, everybody, I just have to sit here and wait because I'm going to edit in a little. I always think the pause when the music is going to go is always funny. Anyways, what's going on, everybody? My name is Robert Schmitz here with Bear With Us, a Chicago Bears podcast hosted by yours truly, along with my co-host Nick Whalen of Football Guys. And what a doozy of a football game we have to break down. Now, Nick, I'm going to start with something that I think a lot of Bears fans in this moment are going to find unbelievable. There are a lot of positives. I actually mean an absurd amount of positives to take away from this result. But we have to start where it really hurts. Can you believe this game ended the way that it did?
No, because this was for man, I wanted to say 3/4, and that's not even right. For, um, you know, 9/10 of the game. It was everything. I'm if people look at my setup, I'm in Michigan right now, ironically, on Thanksgiving. I don't have my mic. It's a different setup, but on my drive here, I was like, how could this game go any more perfectly? And I was like, yeah, like the defense steps up because it's played so well. We talked about that the last 6 games. Fields comes back and he's clicking with more, and they're efficient, and he doesn't get sacked. And like I'm on the drive over, and I was like, yeah, okay, this, and then all those things were happening. I was like pinching myself. I'm like, is this a dream? And then we got Eberflus.
Dream game. Dream game. Let's dig into that a little bit because I love that notion. First off, not only do the Bears start with the ball, I'm starting to think that the Bears' whole starting with the ball thing is a shtick to basically control the game script in totality. Basically, they assume that the other team is going to make them start with the ball if they lose the toss, and if they win the toss, they're going to start with the ball anyways. So therefore, they cook up that they just get used to that. I actually think that's kind of neat. By the way, the longer I've sat on that, the more I'm like, oh, I hadn't thought about it. Like now you know exactly what's going to happen on your first drive.
Yep.
Anyways, moving past it. Early drive for the Detroit Lions. Jaquan Brisker running down to cover the flat unintentionally runs into a receiver, takes him off his route in a play that would be completely illegal if it wasn't incidental, and Tyreek Stevenson picks off a pass. Just a little later, TJ Edwards, after Jared Goff gets pressured, catches a ball thrown straight to him that Jared knows he cannot throw. Jalen Johnson dropped pick six later, and suddenly the Bears are balling on
Yep.
defense. Like, I mean, they are getting everything and more they could want from this Lions scheme, and somehow they still went into the first half down after they'd started hot, up 7-0. There's so much to unpack here. But it really is. And that doesn't even mention, Nick, that I thought there were a couple calls that if the jerseys were flipped, I'd be raving mad about them. There were a couple of these incidental downfield or incidental contact penalties that got thrown where I was like, he didn't do anything. In particular, a third down play that really stuck out to me where Tyler Scott looked like he just stumbled in the middle of his route and they flagged him for it. Yep. And then the Tanyan defensive pass interference that they called on a ball that was strictly speaking uncatchable. Like there were a bunch of plays
Even the Cole Kmet one. Cole Kmet's just clearing out.
Right.
And they had defensive holding. And one of my buddies is a really good Lions fan. We were texting back and forth, and he's like, "These are soft." I'm like,
I'd have been livid. I'd have been livid.
There's only one call I would say that was severely against Chicago, and that was on a fumble that didn't happen where Lucas Patrick gets depleted, which is illegal now and injured and can't even return to the game.
But tell me that there wasn't a piece of you that was happy to see it anyways.
No. I know I've been negative at Lucas Patrick, but like as someone that coaches, like, injuries are just
Ooh,
the worst.
I don't
Injuries are the
believe
worst stuff.
you. I don't know.
No,
If
I
he
no.
hadn't been hurt, you'd have been laughing, but he did
No,
get
I mean,
hurt.
if they just replaced him because of how well he plays on the field or how poorly he plays on the field, I'd be okay with it, but no, no injuries.
Oh,
But then we saw Feeney can't even figure out the snap count and how
oh my
many little
goodness.
delay of games and
Oh
messed
my
ups they
goodness.
have.
They looked like they just signed him. I mean, he
Yeah,
he looked brand new to the team, and I would have actually cut him a lot of slack if he was brand new to the team. But I got bad news for you. Not only has he been there the whole time, you don't need to count. He's been there the entire season. Like 10 weeks is plenty, and they traded a sixth round pick for him, and
yep.
he accounts for more than likely two delay of games, one or a third that they pick up a timeout, and then a false start on account for that in what ends up being part of what bogs down the Bears early. Now there's a lot of scheme, what the Bears were doing, how the Lions adjusted that we could get into, because kudos to Aaron Glenn. Despite the Bears having a lot go right for them in this game, I thought the Lions actually adjusted off of their early script really well because they were
Mhm.
getting pantsed early
Yep,
on by the Bears. Like,
yep.
let's as we just sort of move through this game. What did you think of Fields? Because I thought after I've been whining nearly all season about how Fields looks more than anything slow, even with the ball in his hands. Suddenly we saw Fields stepping up in the pocket. We saw Fields get the ball out in the face of the blitz. He went the first 3.5 quarters without a sack to his name, despite plenty of dropbacks. He made things work with his feet. I'm not going to use the word magic. It gets abused in these kinds of conversations. But like Fields runs for 100 yards, throws for a very efficient 160 at the time. I really don't have much to complain about from Justin Fields because at least within the structure of what Fields is realistically going to do for you on offense, this was it. This was really like this is everything you'd want.
Mhm. The number one thing I would say is he looked composed. Like he looked like he was the Minnesota game looked like he wasn't in control of that game. But this game he was in control. You know, early in the game we talked about or you had mentioned the adjustments Detroit made after that drive, but they were going east and west and
Hmm.
really getting them going horizontally and then they attacked them vertically. It was a really good game plan to start with. But even after that, he's like, "Okay, I'll keep the ball and I'll run," and he was smart about it. I
Hmm.
think there were a couple of them that maybe he coulda got a flag on because it's like, there's a little extra," and Fields was not happy about it, but,
No,
I did think that some of the passes didn't come out clean. Did you
right.
notice that? Like, they weren't tight spirals. He's not a great tight spiral guy all the time anyway, but I thought some of them did get affected by the thumb.
Oh, sure. But especially with how hard I've been on Fields, look, I'm a media member. I'm not a coach, right? I get how this game works. And so on a game like this, where plenty of people who didn't watch the game are gonna see that last play of the game where Fields gives up a strip sack and they're gonna point and say, see, still not enough. No, I'm not gonna put up with that this
Nope.
week. Like, especially on first watch through, Fields was plenty. And he's playing hurt. Because like you're saying, you could tell that he still had issues that he was working through,
Well,
and yet,
and the other finger, I'm not and the middle one was
mhm,
bleeding.
right? And so I can't help but look at this game and think to myself that like you've got a quarterback that battled through. I don't want to call it adversity. If anything, he was kind of gifted a whole bunch of chances. Nothing wrong with that. Plenty of quarterbacks every single week in the NFL get gifted a lot of chances, and they do plenty with it. I thought that Fields throw to DJ Moore should have been a dagger. I also thought that Fields was accurate enough on that throw to Tyler Scott. I
Oh
think
my
if Scott
gosh, yes.
catches that ball, it's the jugular. Let alone, not only does he probably score, but worst case scenario, he trips over himself reaching for it and then eats it, and the Bears kick to go up 9, and the game is over all the same. I mean, it'd be the only highlight anybody would show. And so,
And then how clutches would a play like that be, Robert? Like every
outstandingly.
we want an elite quarterback. We want a guy that's gonna do this and that. And he did it, and the receiver slowed down a little bit, not think it
Sure.
was gonna get thrown his way, and that's it. Because that would have been the crowning moment of, oh, maybe the conversation shouldn't be Fields versus one of these young quarterbacks. It should be Fields because he did it.
Oh, on the clock eating drive that the Bears had, I thought Fields made a couple of huge plays with his feet and arm. Again,
Mhm.
no sacks for a guy with a 6 or a 13% sack percentage coming into the game and a career sack percentage well over 10%. The fact that Fields was able to stay out of trouble was massive for this offense, and it kept the ball rolling downhill. And there's two other guys I want to talk about, Nick, because they deserve every mention that we can give them. And it's kind of the whole offensive line, but in particular, Darnell Wright and Braxton Jones were phenomenal. If
Mhm.
you were looking for an argument to say the Bears have their tackles, I thought the offensive line was awesome. And
Yeah.
even, yes, I get it. The last play of the game happened.
Right.
But keeping Aiden Hutchinson in check like that, largely by yourself for an entire game as a rookie, was awesome, in my opinion. And I am very, very upbeat about the way a lot of the offensive line played. I mean, we could do this for a lot of positions, but I want to start here first. I thought
Yeah,
the
yeah,
what did
I
you
think
think?
well, I think the interior had a little bit of issues, and that's why they started going to a perimeter run game, and they made some great plays. Branch made some great plays, again, some negative, plays there. But, yeah, I agree with you. I think the tackles give you some confidence moving forward, especially with how young they are, that when you wanna project what and we're already looking at the draft next year. We know there's gonna be 2 early picks no matter where they are, and
Shh,
there's a
shh,
good
shh, shh, we'll
tackle
get there
class.
later. We'll get there
Yeah, I
later.
know. But I'm just saying, like, it makes me ignore that now because I know Braxton was not happy. I don't know why they took him off, whether it was like they were checking for an injury or it was he got in Alonzo's face,
Mhm.
or and I don't know if they weren't happy about that, and that's why the refs took him off. But either way, he was back in and he still played fine. And so that's, I mean, we're pretty critical of Ryan Poles. He nailed 2 offensive tackle bookends, in 2 drafts with 1 first and a 5th. That is a home run.
And I mean, I think DJ Moore speaks for himself. Like
Mhm.
there was that phenomenal yards after catch play where DJ Moore just looked like
Oh
an
my gosh.
untackleable, like walking god, what
I
basically
love him.
wading through the entire defense. He adds Roshan Johnson, who the moment that the Bears lost Deontay Foreman for the fourth time, apparently that was too many. Like
Oh my
Deontay
gosh.
Foreman went down with injury so many times and continued to suit back up and get through it. That sounded tongue in cheek. If anything, that sounded condescending. I don't want to do that. Deontay Foreman was a warrior today. And then when he couldn't go anymore, 23 could. And that run he had where he just ran somebody over halfway through or halfway before the third down marker, that was awesome. So we're talking about a lot of positives. You want to do some more? Or
I
do you
well,
want to side on any of those before we do defensive stuff?
sure. So okay, one thing I wanna just the nuance of DJ Moore's touchdown where he widens
Uh
the corner and
uh
then stacks him. I'm just like, that's everything. That
as wide as
because
you want.
that shows you that technique matters so much more than overall athleticism. I was like, "Yes, I love that." And then here's the negative I have about Roshan Johnson, okay? We know when he got injured, right, what happened to him?
Hmm.
And then today he had 2 of those where he's like, "I'm just gonna Earl Campbell run right through you." And I'm like, "What if you try to juke him, man? Like, what if you try to go around him a little bit?" Like, it seems like he only has one thing and it's truck stick, like, all the time.
I
But
agree, but
I
it's
agree,
fun when
they're
it
all
works.
positive.
so
Yeah.
so then we move to the defense, and I'm not going to talk about the sweat thing. I don't know why he is or isn't on the field half the time, right? But the rookies are showing out, right?
Mhm.
You not only do you get Tyreek Stevenson making a couple plays throughout the game, forcing the fumble, catching the interception
Finally.
that's thrown
Yeah.
right to him,
Mhm.
but you get Gervin Dexter like creating legitimate pressure. One of the biggest plays of the game, and this is football, man. When people talk about like the little plays, Zach Pickens' first step creates a hold, pushes the Lions back. Second and 18, that's the play where Jared Goff floats a pass over the middle, trying to create something on the Lions offense and gives it away to TJ Edwards. It's set up by that huge loss of 10 yards that came from number 96. And so you look at all these positives, and Nick, they lost. So I've been building this for about 10 minutes now. Nick, why'd they lose? You got an idea?
I if okay, if I was looking at the Detroit Lions and I was like, "Hmm, who would I wanna guard the most?" Right? It might be their best wide receiver. And, like, for some reason, it didn't seem like he was bracketed. It seemed like he could run option routes no matter where he wanted to go all the time. And it's like, make anyone else beat you. Now, again, Jameson Williams did later, but like up until then, this prevent, rush for, or again, they were rushing guys from so deep it didn't even matter at one point that all these 5, 4, 7 yard completions down the field, mainly to St. Brown and some to the running backs, move them down the field two different times. And so one of them bothers me, Robert, is this. Second quarter, kick the field goal, 10-7, a minute 47 on the clock. You said you didn't want to get into it, but I'm going to get into it. You don't put Sweat on the field. They go down the field in 75 seconds and score a touchdown. Like, at some point, you can't be prevent because you're not preventing anything. You're just allowing people to score points on you.
Right.
And then the other one was that you're up 26-14 with 7:15 left. No Sweat. They drive down and score. And then we know what happened. It was interior run, no Tyler Scott. And then they drive down the same thing. Like, you're not preventing anything, Flus.
Yep. Oh, if you're waiting for me, I'll go to town because
I know you will, but like for me, like we were making so much progress and we were showing it, but you can't be so passive in the zones. Like, I'm okay if they went to that intermediate level over the linebackers to try and force some completions. Like, make it hard. They didn't make it difficult at all for Goff. It was like, oh, boom, 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 boom.
Schematically, I mean, that is what the Bears do, though. Like, and it's what they had been doing that had been working the entire game for the most part. Because I didn't see them do like a drop 3 prevent. They just played a ton of spot drop. And the Lions were ready for it. It was nothing out of the ordinary. They even blitzed a couple times, for crying out loud. And so, to me, what I think sticks out in this game, you'll see Howie Long, you'll see Jimmy Johnson, you'll see all these different analysts on Fox, on NBC, when they cut to that like big group of dudes panel, basically, they will whine about the word analytics. They'll act like it's a disease within the sport. Matt Eberflus made not one, not two, in my opinion, but 3 damning high leverage decisions that cost the Bears the game. And this is why people within the analytics community have been whining about defensive style head coach thinking from 2006. Wonder what Matt Eberflus thinks like for so long. Let's go through them, Nick. So the Bears score, huge touchdown. I'm sitting here tweeting about it. The big throw to DJ Moore puts them up 5 points, and a fairly convincing 5 points at that. At least it feels like it at the time, because the Lions cannot get out of their own way, right? And so I assumed the Bears would go for 2, because that is just the gimme thing to do in this setting, for crying out loud. Like,
it's obvious.
It's obvious. Being up 5 doesn't help, or being up 6 doesn't help you. Being up 5 is the same, more or less. Go take 2. And so they don't. They pass on that. All right. So then later in the game, the Bears are now up 6. Obviously, we know they run the ball, short yardage run, to push the ball up on like 3rd and 1.5. I think they may have tush pushed. They get stopped. Okay. So it's 4th and inches.
I thought that was a bad spot. Do you think it was a bad spot?
I don't care. And that's not me trying to take it away from you. It's more me thinking as a coach that sometimes sometimes you're going to get jobbed by the spot. And so like you're at the behest of what the ref tells you the ball is doing, right?
Hey, keep cooking, man. You're cooking. Go ahead.
4th and inches. You know you could get this. Nobody doesn't get this off the tush push in the year of this league right now. But whatever. You decide that you're going to kick the ball. And you're going to take 6 and go up 9, right? Which is a perfectly defensible position. It takes it from a 1-score game to a 2-score game. If I was coaching, this is one I probably would have made. But it compounds with the fact that we have already decided not to go for 2. Because if we had gone for 2 and gotten it, now this kick puts you up 10. It gets you already to the point where a field goal and a touchdown don't beat you. We'll get there later. Because then, later in the game, after this massive clock-killing drive, Bears are 4th and 1 again? And so they decide they're going to kick it to go up 12. Because
I'm sorry, that one, yes.
Up 12, they're protected against the Lions winning off a field goal, which they would have been protected by had they gone for 2. Instead, they feel the need to kick to go up 12, and so dies their last neutral possession with the football, because the moment they get it after that, they're in full clock protection mode. It's outrageously frustrating looking at that situation because you knew what they were going to do. It's a defensive head coach. He's going to tell Luke Getsy, "Now you can't run it wide. You can't throw the ball. You get 2 runs up the middle, whatever your favorite ones are, and then you could do whatever you want on third down." That's exactly what the Bears do. It opens, this is all I'm saying, those decisions opened the door for the Lions to walk through to a win. You could have closed it. You didn't. And then when disaster strikes, in my opinion, sure, if we wanted to blame the defensive calls, we can. If we wanted to blame the defenders, we can. But you gave the Lions a life rope, or like what? A lifeline. They took it, and you have nobody to blame for yourself, in my opinion.
Yeah. So let me ask you a simple question.
Yes.
When you get the defense to jump off sides, how many yards do you get?
5.
5. Okay. Both of those calls you're talking about. 4th and 5 was the second one to go up 12. 4th and 1 was the other one to go up whatever 9. Now it was at the 23 was the 4th and 1, and then they were down to the 21 for the 4th and 5. Okay. Now this is again super elementary, but I all the time, okay, coaching, whether I'm OC, whether I'm on staff talking to the, whoever calls plays, we get into these situations anytime it's like 3rd down, 4th down, and like that's the distance. I'm like, hey, get him to jump off sides. And you always get the push like, that's stupid. We'll jump off sides, like all those things. But then, finally like, fine, we'll try it. You know how many times it works?
Even if it works 10% of the time, that's 10% of the time for free.
Right. So let's say it didn't work either time. Okay. Santos then has a 44-yarder, and then he has a 45-yard field goal. Those both seem in his range if you just got delay of games.
Santos
Santos
needs a mention of his own. Dude drilled a 53-yarder like it was a 35-yarder.
Right.
Keep going. You're on a roll.
But right, yeah. So those are still good, right? And again, obviously the closer the higher range. But what if you just went up there to tush push on the 4th and 1 and you hard counted it? That's probably one of those times when they're really going to jump. Okay. Free first down. It's a different ball game. You didn't even try it.
There's no way that wouldn't work either, because these defensive players are having to tune up to stop the tush push, which it feels fundamentally impossible. So, man, if you walked up the first or the second time, because the Bears haven't done this, they haven't done it all season, and you just walked up with Fields and you hard counted it the first time, I bet you it's a coin flip chance you'd catch somebody jumping off sides.
I know.
Like,
and there's a no lose here. That you false start, cool, kick the field goal, delay a game, cool, kick the field goal, or you get him to jump off sides and you get a fresh set of downs to work clock, maybe score a touchdown and win the game. Like that's another decision that they don't make either. They're just like, nah, conservative. I mean, even the one was like cool, we'll just keep running the ball no matter what. Like it was the run before, okay, it was 3rd and 7 at the 23, and it was a run up the middle by Roschon Johnson for 2 yards.
It was 3rd and 11, actually, which I'm only correcting you on because it was worse, to your point.
I'm looking at the one to go up 12.
Yeah, I think it is. No, that one was earlier in the game. So you're right. Yeah. Third and 7. 3rd and 7. They run conservatively, and Roschon just grinds out 6 yards.
Yeah. Like it's conservative all the way around. And like, this is what you get when you're conservative. Now you can be too risky, and I get that. And there's certain times, but you can't tell me you go for it on 4th and 1 against Denver and don't get it. And now you go so conservative here where you lose the damn game. Like there has to be a middle ground where you're smartly aggressive.
And to me, the worst part about this, so like, everybody talks about momentum, and I've always been obsessed with trying to figure out another way to use the word momentum. Like, how do we say what momentum is, but like we don't use the word momentum, right? Because I grew up, my mom was always adamant. She was like, momentum isn't real. Stop lying to yourself, right? But the problem is that when you're on a team like Matt Eberflus, like when you're on a team like this Matt Eberflus Bears team, you believe it. I mean, you've been through the Denver game. You've been through what Washington almost was, right? So as the game starts turning against the Bears, as Tyler Scott doesn't run that ball down, you could almost feel the defense know what was coming. And I mean, goodness, I don't think the Lions had an easier drive in the game. They cut through the Bears defense with the game on the line like a hot knife through butter. And it was gross. I mean, that's to me, that's Matt Eberflus's legacy. Like, I understand that I'm hard on the guy, but that's the legacy. That when the game is on the line, Ben Johnson was ultimately able to pull a rabbit out of his hat with Dan Campbell, and you're the one holding the bag. Like,
Yeah.
that sucks.
Yeah, and I mean, they have to feel like they stole one. Like they played like their worst game that they could play, and they stole a game from Chicago. And at some point, like we're talking about with the coaching, I mean, like you have to be so bad to lose games like this. I mean, right here, you're 2 times the time of possession, Robert. So you're beating up their defense, right? Which means that we should be gaining more yards rushing than we were because it wasn't even good. Honestly, we weren't efficient. And then we're +3 in the turnover margin, and we have the same amount of yards. If I told you that before the game, we're +3 in turnovers, we have twice the time possession and the same amount of yards, you would be like, "Oh yeah, we won the game." But we didn't.
We
And
didn't.
like, I mean, we covered, and whatever, and we could talk about whether, remember my whole thing about like rest and, whatever, like may have
They sure
helped.
looked fresher.
But like this is like just such a joke of a game because coaches put them in bad positions. I mean, also this, how many times were there like -6, -5 yard plays to start drives? And it's like, okay, that drive's gone. Like the Tyler Scott fumble, it was a -2 yard run by Fields, a false start, and then a completion. Tyler Scott fumbles. It's like we had so many negative plays too that messed up this, like not being even more successful in drives early in this game.
And that's where I actually want to kudo Aaron Glenn, because what the Bears were doing, at least it seemed like to start, was they were trying to get wide with their running game. They were trying to use a whole lot of read
Mhm.
option, and the Lions seemed to adapt to that by just sending a blitzer on a lot of early downs to basically try and jump on Fields before he'd figured out a blitzer was coming with a lot of these mesh points, and they created a bunch of TFLs. Like, and then when it wasn't going to be that, when it was a pitch action, the blitzer could just go pick up the runner, and all of a sudden you had a huge TFL to start. And if there was a criticism, I guess, that we could pass along to the Bears offense, it's that they still did not react to these like long down scenarios outstandingly well. Penalties sure helped them dig out of a couple of these situations, but also Fields had a couple nice long runs, especially on the clock killing drive, where he had that one scramble where he just raced up the sidelines for a bunch of yards, and early on where it seemed like the Lions just forgot to QB spy him, and so he ran around everybody, and he looked great doing it. I mean, it was funny watching this offense because, in my opinion, it still didn't look like a, let's call it, truly complete offense, but it was good enough on this day, I thought, to beat the Lions. Not only should 26 points win you the game in the first place, but man, Nick, Aaron Glenn's adjustments kept all the points off the board when the Bears picked up those 2 interceptions, and even just 3 of those could have changed the game, right?
Oh my gosh. Like, I mean, they scored a touchdown off of, the turnover by Tyler Scott, and we had very little points. Like that's so I mean, that's the momentum thing you're talking about. Like you get the turnover, and then it's like if you get the touchdown, it's just like wham. Like
Boom.
Chicago, we're down at the half and we completely outplayed them. And that's the momentum factor. Like it could
Mhm.
have been the other way. And like we're talking about this, like we ran the ball, and I don't know. I mean, I'd have to calculate this real quickly, but I mean, we were so inefficient running the ball, Robert, and we were still up. I know some of it was like clock killing, whatever, but like Fields had do you remember in the Denver game when he's like running around, the guy's there on the boot and he's messing with him, and then he finds Herbert for a touchdown,
Oh yeah.
or he's rolling out, buying time, buying time, buying time, and then finds Komet for a touchdown. Like he's just at that next level where he's like, no one can mess with me. Like I'm just
Right.
toying with everybody. That's what it felt like early in this game. And I'm like, why not just let Fields eat and throw more and like, still even be on the edge? And it feels like we got away from that.
I don't know. I don't know what the answers are there, because I guess I'm a believer that eventually you do have to win the game from the pocket, right? But that said, all the movement stuff the Bears were doing early had the whole Lions defense in fits. right? The main thing the Lions seemed to counter it with was pushing everybody up on the line of scrimmage. Like the blitzers we talked about, absolutely. But they went from having what, 6 guys on the line of scrimmage to having closer to 8, where they'd have
12,
some DBs out
15,
wide. What?
15, 12. How many guys do they have on the line of scrimmage?
Sure felt that way, right?
22. Robert, how many yards per carry do you think our running backs had today?
So the running backs, if I had to guess, so all I know is that the Bears rushed 44 times for 183 yards. Fields rushed for 104. So I'm trying to do back of the napkin math on a decent guess here. I'm going to guess it's about 2.5 yards a carry.
2.8 yards per carry.
Man.
I mean,
That ain't great.
and Roshan was 6 for 30. So, and he had that 14-yarder that was nice. I mean, Herbert was 16 for 35,
Herbert was not good.
and
It
Foreman
felt
was 6 for 14.
it felt like the Lions looked as if they had picked up on some kind of tell when Khalil Herbert was in the game, because far be it from me to assume that the Bears play calls were getting basically read, but Khalil Herbert could not touch the ball without somebody on him
Nope.
immediately. And so I don't know what that means about the Bears usage, but not a great day from him. Not that he was set up well.
Yeah, and that's the thing is like that's another part of coaching where it's like, I know we're trying to kill clock, but
Right.
you don't have to just run the ball to kill clock. Like, I mean, let's talk about the Lions in a different sense. One of my favorite games of the year last year was when Detroit knocked Green Bay out of the playoffs, the last game of the year, and Detroit had nothing to play for, right?
Right.
And I don't know if you remember late in that game,
It was awesome.
they were throwing. Remember they had that like hook and ladder, and like they kept throwing to extend the drive, and eventually then that was it, and then they can kneel it out. And this is like one of those times where it's like if you're going to load the box, just simple math, Robert. What do
Your
you do? There's
weapons.
8 guys in the box. What do you do?
I mean, I throw the ball,
You got
but
DJ Moore. You got DJ Moore versus whoever. None of those DBs are good. We talked about that on the pregame pod, or even Mooney against whomever. Like Brian Branch is good, but he was down in the box. He's ready to mess some stuff up. Like we should have thrown more, even if it's an easy
sure.
out, a
But like
comeback, something.
that's not really what Fields and this whole scheme is. You know what I'm saying? Like I agree with you. I love spread coast, west coast, best coast, baby. Like these games that we saw, like a certain somebody yesterday having 44 dropbacks against UCLA, that's fun. I love that. Even when it doesn't work. I love like extension of the run game, all kinds of throwing, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But even when we envisioned this offense in the offseason, this was much closer to what we thought it would look like, right? Where Fields is going to touch the ball 30 to 35 times, but he's going to run it on probably 8 to 12 totes, right? Like, I also would have loved to throw the ball more. Don't get me wrong, but the Bears didn't attempt any quick screens at the line of scrimmage. They didn't really attempt a major amount of. Did they attempt one?
Yeah, the DJ Moore had that one, and he got like
Yes,
4 or 5 on it.
you're right. More to
But they
say
should have had
though,
more.
it's really more me trying to lean into the idea that like the Bears seemed like they did a really pretty good job of identifying what Justin Fields is comfortable with, and they cut out a lot of the stuff that he's not comfortable with. I don't want to turn this into anything negative about Fields. If anything, Nick, am I allowed to say I think he likes the plan they ran? I don't think Fields, if he was sitting on this podcast, would tell us that, yeah, we should have thrown the ball more. You know what I'm saying? I think Fields would have said, well, we just got to, he actually said, I know this much, that he said, we need to execute better, to be honest. Quote, if I'm being real, we should have won that game. It comes down to finishing and executing in the end. That's how you do it. And obviously, there are plenty of plays that stick out. I think Jalen Johnson has to still be staring at his hands, visualizing what it would have been like to run that ball back 99 yards the other way, or early or later in the game, catch the ball that came off the tip, right? Because he had 2 shots at an interception and comes away with
Well,
no interception.
he had a bad game. If we're being honest, Jalen Johnson had a bad game. He had those 2 plays that could have been positives, but then he had the deep PI because he bit on the double move and was too physical. That was a
Mhm.
40-some yard play that flipped the field in the first half. And then he gave up the touchdown to Williams, right?
Right.
I mean, which if you're in prevent, where's the help over the top? If you're
Were
going
they
to put
in
over the top
prevent or were
help,
they in cover 4? Like, I didn't get a good look at that one because my son kind of
is there
exploded
is
as that
there is
happened.
there a difference sometimes?
No. But it's more to say that because Jameson Williams ran a post, right? Again,
I
didn't get a good look at it.
yeah,
So I'm
I
really
didn't either.
asking.
That's why but I thought it was on, Johnson's side.
Uh, if it stayed on Johnson's side, that's one thing. But I know a post on the outside, like outside breaking in, is like
Right.
a classic cover four beater, and generally
Yeah.
there's like maybe 10 corners that can keep up with that,
Yeah,
and
that's true.
JJ's
That's not
not
his
one of those
strength.
guys.
I'll give him that, but I still don't think he had a great game.
No, I'm not trying to con you into telling me that you thought
Yeah, yeah.
JJ played great,
Yeah, yeah.
but it's especially because to me, I understand that the big joke is that everybody plays defense, or like everybody that plays defense played offense, but then had to get moved because of their hands. But that third pick on Goff, running that ball back, the game would have been over. No more air. And
Yep.
I don't know. To me, the hard part is that like I could sit here and I could talk about missed opportunities because it's unfair and it would be very Bears podcast to just lay this all at the feet of Matt Eberflus and be like everybody was great. The Bears rule. The coach sucks. Get a new coach and everything's good. It's not that simple. It's not that simple. But I do think that the coach has to own the majority of this loss. And in my opinion, especially the fact that you already had the Denver loss happen this season and you let this happen in a division rival's house, up 4-1 in the turnover battle, up 26-14 with less than 5 minutes remaining in the game with your job on the line. I think this one was inexcusable. I
Yep.
think if there's any good news to be had, it is that in my opinion, Matt Eberflus showed everybody irrefutably that he ain't it. And
No.
you and I could sit here, we could watch the tape and we could whine that Matt Eberflus ain't it. But a lot of times in Bears history, that has not, two guys on a podcast has not been enough. This loss, I really don't know how you come back from this. I really
No.
don't.
No. And I think it's at this point, it's done because, like, this could have been flipping everything, right? Like you talked about, like you put this win, you stack some more things together. It's your first winning streak. You could sell that story to whomever you want, but now you can't do that because now it's almost Robert, where again I'm looking down at the records, like you almost want to lose now, and we know Flus doesn't want to
Am
lose.
I
You know what I
bringing you
mean?
over? Am I finally coming through?
Well, I'm there now. I'm there now. But like, I mean, are they gonna fire him before the season's over is the next 'cause he's gotta be gone. He has to be gone because you're not nothing you've done have shown that you're the answer at this point. So, do they fire him before the season's over? My gut tells me they do.
I don't know. I think that they'd have to lose another backbreaker. Like as long as they roll out on Monday Night Football and they lose like a normal game, in a normal way, I tend to think that they'll be all right. And again, what gets really crazy is it possible for this Matt Eberflus defense? Because hey, credit where credit's due. I have talked a lot of mess about how much I hate this defensive scheme. The players are making this thing work anyways. Like the players are kind of gaming, especially when they're able to get pressure like they have. If you told me that all this hype regarding Josh Dobbs and the Pastronaut was going to fall kind of flat in Minneapolis on Monday Night Football after weeks of tape to get prepped for it, would you find that unbelievable? I would find that very believable. That would be very normal, as a matter of fact, for a hot quarterback, like for his hot streak to end about 3 or 4 weeks after it started. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying?
Yeah.
And
Well,
so
yeah, I mean, I would yeah, I'd consider that for sure.
So I could easily see that game because every time we lose a game every time we win a game, no matter how ugly it is, everybody goes, "Well, I think the Bears are going to win this next game." And every time we lose a game, no matter how ugly it or like no matter how good parts of it were, we assume the Bears are going to get blown out. I think that the Monday Night Football game coming up could easily just be a knockdown, drag out war between both sides. But this team is just not showing the backbone you need to win. I can't believe I'm
No.
quoting Dan Wiederer. I can't believe I'm quoting Dan Wiederer. But yeah, this team doesn't know how to win. They're really good at losing. They're
There
really good at
yeah.
losing. And
I have another coaching scenario for you that I wrote down that we didn't bring up, that I debated because at the end of the game, you are winning. They have to score a touchdown, right? I mean, I think that's how the score would be, right? They had to score a touchdown to go up. Or could they have kicked a field goal?
the
Am I wrong
Lions,
there? Yeah.
They had to
Oh,
score.
no, I forgot about the safety. Yeah, so they had to score a touchdown. Okay. They get it down to the 1. They have no timeouts left.
None.
It's first down.
Well, they got a bonus timeout from Matt Eberflus. Don't
That's what
forget
I'm
about
asking
that.
you about. That's what I'm gonna ask you about. Would you have called a timeout? Because I wouldn't have, because if you call the timeout, it allows them to run the football. If you don't, then they either have to spike it and run, or they have to do that quick, or they have to throw, which I like our odds better by not calling the timeout and letting the clock go down.
So I would have had to pre-planned this. Like I have to think through it, right? In the moment, I probably wouldn't have called a timeout. You know what I'm saying? But also in the moment, I would have, or not in the moment, getting away from the moment, I would have hoped that I'd have tried to ice golf on a big down earlier in the game. Like let them line up, let them get emotion moving, and then call the timeout just to try to
Mm,
kind of get them off their rhythm, right? Have
I
them
got you.
holding their hands up going, what? Are you kidding me? And then we
Yeah,
can regather the defense. We can take a look at the look that they just presented us and move on. Maybe
yeah.
we get a stop. Maybe we don't. Right.
Mhm.
But at the very least, I would have started trying to conserve more time sooner because the way that you let the Bears or that the Bears let them bleed the clock down slowly but surely, pretty much like they set their head on a platter
Do you
as that was happening.
I mean, you remember the Marshawn Lynch, they threw Super Bowl, right? The Patriots, like that
Yep.
whole thing.
Yep.
So, I remember Belichick talking about he could have called a timeout because they were inside the 10. They could have tried to conserve time. And he said he didn't call it because they looked a little frazzled. And then you want them to organize and get it and run and do
Exactly.
all that kind of stuff. I'm just saying, I would not have called a timeout. I would have let them, if
The
they,
way oh, I agree with you. Like I'm trying to say if I wanted to conserve time, I would have started doing it sooner,
no, I know.
right? If you were Matt Eberflus though, you were past the point of no return. You had to make them organize so that they were either going to spike it for you and blow it down or that they were going to just try to quick snap it. That costs a lot of pre-snap penalties in games like this. Or maybe just maybe they run a play thinking they're going to get in, you get a stop, and they just plumb run out of time. Like
Right.
the way that they did it made it way too easy
Well,
for what Detroit
like in
wanted
my
to do.
mind, if you call that timeout, then they think you're gonna call timeout every time after that down, so they can just run it 3 straight times. I'm like, "This is idiotic."
What
Like,
would you be
make it
scared
make
of?
sense.
What would you be scared of, right? And
No, nothing.
now, do you want to keep talking about this game or do you want to pivot to the positives? The
I okay,
positives beyond the game.
I got no, one positive about the game,
Good.
okay? And this is for my boy, okay? If people are watching this, I know we got our live stream going too, but, Justin Fields, he had a 105 quarterback rating. He had one pass that could have maybe gotten intercepted, was questionable. He threw balls away when it was smart to throw them away. He made plays. He ran for over 100 yards, which, by the way, he's done that 3 straight times against the Lions. And what more could you have wanted from Justin Fields today? Is there anything, Robert?
Well, that's the thing, right? Because I promise I'm not trying to be somebody that just doesn't know what's good for him, right? If I could have begged for anything from Justin Fields, it would have been scoring more on the drives where the Bears like had caught the turnovers. But I would argue that that is an entire offensive game plan identitarian question,
Mhm.
right? Like I can't think of plays off the top of my head. Maybe film review will show something different, but I can't think of a bunch of plays where the quarterback didn't get it, right? Where the quarterback screwed it up. And so maybe there's a piece to I think I think the conversation honestly, Nick, is just way more complicated than we could make it. But on a game like today, I thought he did plenty. Sometimes in the NFL, even Tommy DeVito can win you a game. And
Yeah, well,
so
that
it's
happened. But I'm just saying, for, like, being off for an entire month and coming
oh yeah.
back and not being 100%, like, this is about I mean, yeah, I mean, if Scott would have caught that one, that'd have been great. If you would have connected with more on that deep one earlier, I mean, there's a few things, obviously, that'd be, like, the perfect game, but I'm saying just, I mean, a realistic lens.
Nick, you're not gonna believe this. You're
What?
not gonna believe this. Matt Eberflus blamed the players blatantly. Like Matt Eberflus specifically said, like he said something to the effect of if certain guys had made more plays, they would have won. And then said Sanborn and Johnson were guys that didn't make plays last week. And I am pretty blown away at the idea that the coach couldn't at least take this moment to point the thumb. Like,
Well, there's
pressers are
coaching
pressers.
101, okay? I'm a coach, right? I mean, coaching 101, Robert, says, who gets the blame for the losses, Robert?
The coach.
Who gets the credit for the wins?
The players, obviously.
Everyone knows this. What
Now,
are you doing?
now when you're a quarterback, who gets blamed for the loss?
Quarterback.
And who gets credit for the win?
My linemen, the receivers, defense.
This isn't hard, right?
No,
Like,
not hard.
just point the thumb. I am not somebody who's sitting here talking about being a thumb pointer because I care about it. It's more like it's a deviation from what is the accepted norm. Does that make sense? Big nerd talk, but it's more to say everybody does this a certain way, except for these guys.
All right. So we're moving on from Matt Eberflus. Let's talk about. You want to talk about the draft orders? That's where you're leaning.
I want to talk about what an exceptional day it was for the
Oh.
Bears draft position, because not Chicago explicitly, but the New York Giants trot out Tommy DeVito and win a game, and suddenly the biggest threat in the NFL to move to stick with 2 wins the entire time reminds us these coaches just don't tank. Like, everybody, I heard from people that are like connected within football. I heard like people trying to say, look, I don't know anything, but the Giants, they're blatantly tanking. No, they aren't. None of these orgs are. None of these orgs are. And on that day, the Panthers could not beat the Dallas Cowboys. Unsurprising. That's a good Dallas team. But the Washington Commanders gave away another stinker in their house. If I was a Washington fan, I'd be really frustrated. I'm not. I'm excited. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I want to know, at what point did you go to tankathon.com and look at the draft order?
I haven't yet.
Yeah.
I have a rough idea of what it is. I'm not trying to bum you out, but like my big thing is that I'm trying to stay off of it as much as I can until the season kind of resolves itself. That Giants-Patriots game looms large. But look, okay, hang on. I should talk about this. Anybody who's listening to this podcast right now and thinks, what are these losers doing talking about draft position? I get it. But in my opinion, there were always 2 different ways for this season to play out. One way was for Matt Eberflus to show that he's that guy. He's going to lead the Bears into the future alongside Justin Fields, who's also that guy. And they're going to lead the team into the future. To be honest with you, Nick, I did not expect the majority of this roster to look as decent as it does. The roster seems like they are performing really pretty well. The offensive line's better than I expected. I mean, that really is. And so then as we move past that, right, it's like the other option, given that the season's not working out the way that anybody wanted it to, they're 3-8 team, is for pretty much the whole team to bottom out. And you still get development. You basically look for a John Fox effect, but the coach goes and gets himself fired, and the rest of, like, you get a number 1 overall pick, if possible, ideally a number 2 pick, just to give yourself options. If Justin doesn't finish the season well, great. If Justin does, great. You're insured, right? Mm-hmm. And today, if you wanted to keep yourself in the bottom out plan, well, this was a great day of results for it. I mean, an almost unbelievable day of results for it because, Nick, I really don't know. I want to repeat it. I really don't know how Matt Eberflus comes back from this one. Like,
well, or if we're talking about bottoming out and we're talking about, high draft position, maybe you want him to continue to coach the team through the rest of the season because he's going to lose games. I mean, you talked about it. When Tommy DeVito can be the quarterback, and again, we're not trying to make fun of him, but like, he's not close to an NFL starter, okay? When he wins a football game and Chicago can't win games when you are +3 in the turnover margin, like, that is so damning. Like, it's so, but anyways.
Do you know how many sacks Tommy DeVito took today?
Ooh, it was 5 in the first half I saw.
Yeah, do you know how many he finished with in a win? He finished with 9 sacks in a win. And I mean, kudos to Wink Martindale, man. That defense came to play. They made things like, in my opinion.
Hey, Wink Martindale, shout out, by the way. Alma mater, he coached there, Western Kentucky.
That's awesome. I just keep looking at this Giants team, for instance, and I think one of the most frustrating things, if you're a Bears fan that knows what's going on in the rest of the league, it has to be outstandingly frustrating that this crappy Giants team, who just look awful. In most of their, I think it's 7 losses to this point, they have just looked woeful, right?
Mhm.
And you add on that staff one really good lineman, and that's not even Kayvon Thibodeau. In this case, that's Dexter Lawrence. And you add an aggressive, blitzing defensive mind that wants to take your lunch money away, right? And you add an offensive coach that, hey, the Giants' offense has not been spectacular, but they don't have anybody on there. They've got one of the worst offensive lines in football. They've got nearly no receivers to speak of. Their best receiving option is Darren Waller. And they have the same amount of wins as the Bears, who have DJ Moore, who have $120 million worth of spending on their defense. Like, I mean, do you need me to go down the whole laundry list? Because
No.
I'm not trying to make out Brian Dable to be this amazing coach. This is not that moment. Live in a world of gray. But it is frustrating watching a Bears team I think is objectively more talented and has played objectively more talented, that we can't get as many wins as a Giants team that's played a much tougher schedule. That's frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, and you also look at, like, today. I mean, we're not always gonna have obviously be +3 in the turnover margin and be basically +2 in the time of possession margin, but, like, let's say an average team, we play them. This just shows you, like, how talented Chicago is, that they should win quite a few of these games. Like,
They
when
were
you're
in
in.
it. They were
Yeah,
in it, man.
and how many teams are in it with Detroit? Not many. Detroit's been
They were
kicking
on
so
top
much
of it
butt this
even.
year.
Detroit
Yep.
wasn't in it.
No.
Like, Detroit wasn't in it until 5 minutes to go in the game, for crying out loud. That can't get said enough. Do you realize ESPN gave them a 98% chance to win this game? And it slipped through their fingers. Like, I mean, we could say whatever we wanted to about this game by all definition of the way that I evaluate film, because the overwhelming majority of the time, as soon as it hits 95% win percentage, I just stop watching. I really don't want to train my eyes off garbage time, right?
Right.
I would have
Right.
stopped watching this game by that rule, and
Yep.
they lost. I mean, it's a furious comeback that I guess you could say speaks to the mettle of the Detroit Lions. They're a talented bunch, and I thought they were flat today. So kudos to them for finding a way to win. But
Mhm.
man, as a Bears fan, you can't lose this game. And we could keep talking about it. We could go around and around and around the circle and keep talking about it. But to me, I almost feel like, Nick, this one doesn't really drive the nail home. On this podcast, we already drove the nail home. This one just probably does it in the mind of Ryan Poles. Because
Yes.
after weeks, after an entire mini buy of fluff articles leading into the Panthers game and nice comments and Ryan Poles' impassioned defense, how do you lose this one? Right?
Mhm. Well, but I think right there just tells you a little bit, like, the Bears showed that they're competitive today, and we talked about, like, we like a lot of these young players in line, especially the tackles. I mean, the guards too have had some really good points in this season. It shows you what Ryan Poles has put together from almost all bare bones of a roster, like just terrible dead cap, etcetera. And he's putting all this together, and it's the coach's job to develop, put the plan together, to use their strengths to do it on the field. And if they're not doing that, bring someone else in. I don't think that the turnaround for this, when you look at the cap space that we have and the draft picks, that they're going to be high. Right now, they're 1-4, by the way, everybody. So they have the worst or the easiest strength of schedule in terms of all of the 3-win teams. So they jumped ahead of the Giants now. So it's the 4th pick. You put all that together, Robert, I think the Bears could be pretty good next year, no matter whatever they decide at quarterback. I'm not going to get into that debate right now, but I think that this isn't that far away, and today showed that.
No. And I mean, we'll have to see. There is a game coming up that actually has quite a bit of swing to it, and that is the Panthers' upcoming game against Carolina. Well, that's the same name, against the Titans, who have not looked particularly great.
No.
But if the Titans can find a way, the Panthers might be the inside lane for pick number 1. At this point, I mean, God, Nick, I understand that it would have been easier to say this after the Bears get blown out, but I can't help but look at this game and wonder how the locker room's gonna take it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yep.
if you get beat by a team that's better than you, I almost think you brush it off. But the worst is when you get beat by a team that you had it, and you still can't win it, and you know why.
Mhm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it was the most Bears part of this game was when you're up and Jalen Johnson he drives in the ball, drops the interception near the goal line to I mean, you could say pick six it for sure, but in my mind, I'm like, Jalen's not that fast. I wonder if like, one of those guys would catch him. But either way,
was a long way.
big momentum change, right? And then the next play is a touchdown. Like that was the most thing. Like it could have been an interception, maybe a pick six. If not, flipping the field, get some points before the half, and then the next play they score a touchdown. Like that's that. I was like, oh, okay, there it is. I'm waiting for this. And then they played good in the third quarter and the start of the fourth quarter. I'm like, maybe they'll pull this off. And then, oh no, this is who the Bears they are. Like because like you talked about, they don't know how to win. They don't know how to win games. Like that long drive. Again, a penalty helped, but to add points, take a lot of time off the clock, didn't look like the Bears. I was like, man, look, they're converting like every third down. Like they're converting this. They're making this really hard on the Lions. Like that didn't seem Bears-esque,
No.
nor did the ball Justin Fields threw to Tyler Scott that didn't get there. I was like, that doesn't, oh, yep, of course he dropped it. Because like if he would have caught that, it wouldn't have felt like this is the team that we've seen for the last whatever year and a half with Matt Eberflus.
You could even argue that to some extent that's like exactly what Justin Fields' career in Chicago has looked like
Yep.
sometimes, where hey, Nick, if there is one criticism there, cuz I thought he hit the throw. I'm giving him like in my mind, I'm giving him a nod for it. But we're also taking an incredibly low percentage throw on 3rd and 10 and pretty much assuredly giving them a free timeout. Not that it matters, right? At the end of the day, that play can't be the reason. That play can't be why you lost the game. Like
Right.
there's too many plays in between. But
I mean, why is it 3rd and 10?
exactly. And so
Stupid.
beyond this, let's talk about something. Obviously, everybody wants to talk about firing Eberflus. I would. Oh, I don't know if I would, because to me, he's doing a fabulous job at captaining the ship in the direction
Exactly.
that I want him to do it. But the Buffalo Bills fired Ken Dorsey not long ago. They also fired Leslie Frazier. The Bears don't have a defensive coordinator to fire. So here's my question. What do you think it takes for Luke Getsy to lose his job? I didn't actually think Luke was like the whole problem and nothing but the problem today. But all the same, somebody's got to fall on a grenade every once in a while, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually a good point. Yeah, because you gotta at some point you gotta place the blame somewhere, and
Got to
it's
put
just
it
like,
somewhere. And it's
where are we
firing
gonna
season, man.
yeah, it is.
Like,
Well, but I mean, you saw with Frank Reich taking over play calling duties. I mean, he's the hottest coach right now, apparently on the hot seat. Like, I mean, it would make sense, wouldn't it? Like, you got to do something. I mean, if he doesn't think his job is on the line, like he's blind to it in terms of Eberflus. Like, so it would make sense to do that and maybe put what your quarterback coach is, the OC. Is that who you think?
first of all, I think Matt Eberflus has known that his job is on the line
Yeah.
since week 1. Like, personal opinion, part of what's made this season so exhausting is that if us Nick, fans don't take but one nice play to get back on a player's like board, right? Like I've seen people, and it's totally okay if this is you, that are like starting to talk about Tyler Scott as if he's shown absolutely nothing because he had a pretty terrible game today, right? He's a rookie. It happens. It would
Mhm.
be weird if rookies didn't screw up, to be honest with you. And
Right.
he's had plenty of other games that I thought a lot more went really well. But today was the day that he didn't catch up to Justin Fields' ball at the end, and he fumbled early. So he sucks. Cut him, is the way people talk about it. But the coaches seemed really, really surprised by week 1. The coaches seem like they've been backpedaling since day 1 of
Yeah.
this season. It's been brutal to watch, if you ask me. And
Mhm.
so I don't know what happens. If you asked me based on my emotions to pick out what week it was, I would have told you the season was already over. Like this feels like February, doesn't it?
Yeah,
Like
I mean, it was a lot of fight. I mean, that's the one thing you have to say is like, okay, they played really well against a really good team today, but how I mean, if this was them coming from behind and they got it to within 5 points, be like, okay, man, that's a good effort, But like being up and losing it, like you said, there's no coming back from this. Um, how confident are you that Ryan Poles keeps his job?
I'm so indifferent, it's painful. I like polls personally, but if you told me that you were George McCaskey, you Nick were George McCaskey, and you'd been in this guy's office for a while, wondering, hey, you told me we were going to be decent this year. When are we going to start being decent? And you decided, because you're the man with the checkbook, that
Mhm.
you were going to let go of Ryan Poles. I, as the analyst, would look back and I would say, well, I mean, the majority of what Poles' job was to reset the cap and ultimately add young talent and resources. He did it. Like, as much as it would suck, as much as I think Poles becomes Sashi Brown, like the creator,
Yeah.
the what would you call it, the progenitor of the current, like, we're not actually that bad Cleveland Browns that exists still today. I think a new GM could spend his money just as easily as Ryan Poles could spend his money, and the Bears end up in the same place. It's unfair for Poles. Can I say that? But it might happen anyways because this season's getting stinky, and when it
Yeah.
gets when you start to smell that smell, people just want a fresh slate. You know what I mean?
And yeah, I do. I know what you mean. The thing that's the good organizations, and again, this sounds kind of obvious. They don't have turnover. Like you continually can keep building towards this one archetype of philosophy, scheme, players, Raz, whatever. We've talked about a lot of it. And I think keeping polls at least helps make sense in terms of what you assets you already have going towards a direction versus bringing in someone else. Okay, they want to go to the 3-4, and then we're flipping, and like it to me, it doesn't make sense. Plus, the Montez Sweat trade tells me that they do want to keep Poles, and he's making all of the decisions. So I think that Poles don't. I give it about a 15% chance Poles loses his job.
So your fiance, not you. All right, hang on. Let me change this metaphor to make it not so close to home because that I just thought of at the time. But
She might
anyways,
be hearing this upstairs.
your wife has been on you. She's been on you about how you haven't done that kitchen remodel, right? And as soon as she finally gets the kitchen remodel, she's going to leave you alone, right? And maybe as a show of commitment, yeah, this needs to be girlfriend. We're changing this to girlfriend, right? Maybe as a show of commitment, you're going to go and you're going to get that kitchen remodel done as a way to say, I love you. Maybe you're going to see if she means it. So there's part of me
Mm.
that wonders whether getting a guy like Montez Sweat, who we know can play in a 3-4, we know he can play in a 4-3.
Yeah,
He's
he can.
he's a great system fit, but he's also pretty system independent. Like, and he plays the most system independent position possible. Flus has been in these rooms saying, what do you guys expect from me from this defense? I can't play my defense without being able to create pressure on the edge. And I wonder if Ryan Poles went, okay, show me. I'm going to give you enough pieces to where you just can't whine about it anymore.
Yeah.
And here we are. We're still losing. Game doesn't look any different from Denver, does it?
No.
And so I can't help but look at that and wonder, Nick, because I agree with you that in theory, it showed that Poles and Flus, like they were absolutely on the same page and maybe they were looking at keeping him. Or it builds the deck faster than usual that, yeah, I know we tanked last year. This season is fireable. Like in effect, Flus becomes a one and done coach. So you need a lot of proof that he can't do it. And I wonder if Montez Sweat was their way of giving themselves draft flexibility, adding a good player, and also making sure that Matt Eberflus didn't have any excuses that he could run on at the end of the year.
No,
I don't
and
know.
that's a good point. I mean, that's a good point because then you can't like, hey, I gave you the best edge that was available.
You told me this would work.
Right.
You said all we
Well,
needed was one guy.
I gave you the 2 linebackers that you wanted that I didn't want to spend on. However you want to word this
You
whole thing.
wanted them, not me.
Yeah.
You wanted him, not
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Why aren't we winning? Like
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. You know what I didn't think about today from the game?
What?
So like the Bears defense has played well, right?
Mm-hmm.
They got all the turnovers, etc. They allowed 29 points in 1936 time of possession. 29 points in 19 minutes, Robert, is terrible.
Yeah.
Like, imagine if Detroit had another 12 minutes and they had just a little edge in time possession. What would they have had?
I don't know. I mean,
45 points?
hey, honestly, they managed to find a way. Truly, like I don't want to be too corny, but Jared Goff was playing bad ball, and they
Yeah.
still found a way to grind out and like enough to get this done. Overall, though, if you want to start honing in towards the edge of the show, I'm okay honing in towards the end of the show.
I have one other thing.
Yeah, what you got?
I was surprised by one thing. Now, I it was a battle of strengths,
Mhm.
and Chicago did not win in the trenches against the run today. They allowed 5.2 yards per rush.
Did they really?
Yep,
I'm
yep,
shocked. I would have
yeah.
expected them to have run it for much less, given that the Detroit didn't stick with the run like I would have expected them to.
Well, I think that was game script, but I mean, they still on 3rd and 8 or 3rd and 7, they ran the last drive
It's
to get
wild.
to what was it? To like 3rd and 1. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I can't believe they did that." Yeah, Montgomery had 12 rushes for 76 yards, which is an unbelievable average. That's like,
Mhm.
what, 6 yards per
It's like
carry?
6 yards per carry or something.
Over 6. And then Gibbs was 8 for 36, which is still 4 and a
It's
half
plenty.
ish.
It's plenty.
Yeah, and Goff was 2 for 3, so he's, like, bringing that down. I mean, they crushed us up front, and, like, we that was one thing that we were top rush defense, and they have a great O-line, I get it. I know this is revenge game for, David Montgomery, all that kinda stuff, but I did not expect us to give up 5.2, well, actually, it'd be over 5.2, you take out Goff's. I didn't expect us to give up, what, 5.5, 6 yards a carry today.
I'm excited to check the tape on this one because it felt like the Lions' multiplicity in the run game really got to the Bears, really ground the Bears down because they kept the
Mhm.
Bears guessing up front. Like you're talking about, a lot more of these run schemes are pretty mano a mano one way or another. Zone
Yep.
runs, ultimately, it's man on man, and power runs, gap runs. Oh, that's the literal idea, is that
Yeah.
it's man on man. I
Power. Yep.
I couldn't help but think that Ben Johnson actually came and attacked a Bears defense that was on the up with a game plan that had his quarterback executed it, they would have kept rolling. The Bears put a lot of pressure on him though. I mean, it took a while for the Lions to find their footing in this game, and again, I think a lot of that was credit to Matt Eberflus kind of opening the door for them. But not making that point again. That I look at this, I think the same thing. Like the Bears' run defense was not amazing, but at the same time, it I didn't think that they were the problem, right? That
Mm.
that very late play though was a super cool play call. What was that, 3rd and 8?
Well,
Like
let me look it up because I do wanna get it right. I was like, I mean, I didn't expect it. I was like,
game
"Oh, this is
on the
surely a pass."
line. Game on the line. They saw the Bears in a sticks defense and said, "Well, why don't we just run it at them?" And they got it.
Yeah,
Like
3rd and 2 from the 7 with 38 seconds left
that's it.
and no timeouts.
Right.
Ran the ball for 6 yards.
It's awesome. It's awesome. Like,
And like that right there, Robert, and kind of what we've been talking about, that's why Ben Johnson's my number 1 candidate to take over for the Bears.
I mean, he seems really fun, right? And I get that there's all kinds of risk that everybody's looking at. I can even see it in our chat right now that there are plenty that have mentioned like just that frustrating feeling of, oh yeah, let's just reset it because it's going to be so much better the next time, right? But I'll tell you what, this Bears team is pretty well set up to turn over to another mind. I mean,
Yep.
I'm not trying to say that everything is going to work. It's not that simple. We don't know, right? But they're like, you give any new head coach the choice between Justin Fields or one of these young guys, and at least you feel pretty decent about, okay, we have a quarterbacking floor, right? And
Yep.
then you move on from there. You say, okay, now we've got Darnell Wright, still well on his rookie contract. We've got some defensive tackles that are showing something. We've got Montez Sweat while he's still relatively young. We've got maybe two, but at least, or maybe three, but at least two solid corners we're excited about. We got some rebuilding to do in the safety room, even though I think Brisker is at the very least average, but Eddie's probably at the end of the road, and they need to figure something out. That Jamison Williams pass, now that I'm remembering it, that was what, a cover two hole shot, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Like,
that's maybe, yeah.
and so the defense kind of just gave that away, but there you go. Like I look at this Bears team and I think to myself, if you told me that this Bears team had Marvin Harrison Jr. and also whoever they picked at 4, I would get really excited about it. But if you also told me that this Bears team had a new head coach's choice of quarterback and also whoever they picked at number 4, or even crazier, they trade down from 4 for whoever wants to come up for
Yep.
whatever and market that slot, pick up some more draft capital, and add talent from there. Like, I can't help but look at this team and think this thing has a pretty bright future. Like, if the Bears find a similar play to, or like a similar coach to Shane Steichen and what he's doing in Indianapolis. Like, I'm not trying to use D'Amico Ryans. Everybody always wants to use the crazy scenario, right? If the Bears find a quarterback that can give us some fun times in 2024 on a roster ready to roll, I mean, man, Nick, how excited would you be if you added even Malik Neighbors, Keon Coleman, or Rome Odunze to this roster alongside DJ Moore and a choice of quarterback if the Bears did decide to go away from Justin Fields? Like, I see fun days ahead. I see a
Mhm.
Bears defense, or a Bears team that's better built. It's got a much stronger foundation on the offensive and even the defensive lines than it's had in a while. And it's all under control for at least about 2 years. It's the ideal time to be doing this.
It
And
is. It is. And the thing that gets me excited, if it is Ben Johnson, he's my top candidate, is when you look at Detroit, okay? Jared Goff was a toss in that trade. David Montgomery, okay? I've been very critical of David Montgomery. David Montgomery was the least efficient running back the last 4 years when he was at
mhm,
Chicago. He goes to Detroit, and all of a sudden he's above average in efficiency there. You look at St. Brown was a fourth round pick. You look, I mean, Jameson Williams hasn't been good. He's been suspended and injured a little bit there. Laporta's a second round pick. Like the line, there's some first round picks there. I get it. But like you look at a lot of those weapons. I mean, when they had to have Craig Reynolds in there, Josh Reynolds, um, I'm trying to think of the other small receiver, Khalif Raymond,
mhm.
etc. Those how many of those guys there's, like, not many that are, like, premium assets. What Ben Johnson's been able to do, he's like, "Okay, this is what we have. I'm gonna use these guys to the best that they can. I'm gonna coach them up. I'm gonna make them play the best ball that they can." That's the sign of someone that understands football, understands schemes, understands strengths and weaknesses of own team, that be self-scouting, strengths and weaknesses of opponent, and can game plan to have one of the best offenses in the NFL over a year and a half now, Robert. Like, that's a guy that I'm like, that's a good football mind. Like, that person, you put them in Chicago with the weapons you're talking about, we are an above 500 football team easily next year.
Oh yeah. Can't wait, man. But
Mhm,
we're going to have to just wait until all this stuff plays out, because as much as I would love to play out draft scenarios and talk more and more and more, we already kind of hinted at it last week. At least as I see it, the scariest, not scary, the biggest piece to this Bears season is that now they have just finished week 11. They enter week 12. They still have what, 6 games left? There's a lot we don't know. But
mhm.
if you feel like I do, this one was a backbreaker, and
Yeah, it
I
was.
don't know if you can heal it. But that's okay. That's okay. Uh, as we move on, we will find plenty of things to talk about throughout the course of the rest of this season. Again, really excited about a lot of the play by the young guys in this one. Nick, where can folks find your work online?
Yeah, I'll be on Twitter. This week I'm in Michigan. I'm still in Michigan, so I'll be our pregame pod this week. I'll still be here, but I'll be having my contrarian article with football guys again. That's always fun, but I won't be doing any videos or anything this week outside of this.
I completely understand. You can find me every single day on De Bears blog. Is this the Thanksgiving week? This is the Thanksgiving week, right? So we
Hmm.
get a lot more football than usual. We get plenty of Thursday action. We get a Friday game. Then we get more Sunday stuff. So I'll be coming at you guys with articles Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Jeff and I have a bunch of like open threads and basic stuff going on through Thanksgiving. So enjoy some time with however you want to spend it. If it's with family, that's phenomenal. If it's by yourself, that's totally okay. But beyond this, I know I'm excited to see the way that the Bears season plays out. It's a bummer that it's pointed in this direction, but at least it's been extreme, right?
Yeah, yeah, we've had the wide range of emotions. I mean, I was happy for a lot of today. So,
Right? I can't believe it turned like it did. But
mhm.
as always, I'm Robert Schmitz. This has been Bear With Us, Bear Down, and thank you so much for bearing with us. We're clear on the recording. I've got a couple minutes before I got to shut the stream down because I need to go help with my wife.
Sure.
Hey Glitch, we're not like done. I just we're recording a podcast. You got to remember. And if you couldn't tell, I was trying to take plenty of y'all's comments and weave them in
Yeah,
just
yeah,
so
yeah.
that everybody felt there. Donald, I understand the frustration. I promise I do. But as great as that Detroit win would have made you feel, would it have been worth it if Matt Eberflus stays? That's the question I keep asking. Like, let me ask you that, Nick. If you looked in your crystal ball, right, and you saw that even a 4-13 Bears team kept Matt Eberflus because they stomped the Detroit Lions and they were close in all the other games, but ooh, just this play or that play, maybe Fields falls apart, whatever. Like, story. You know what I'm saying? Fill in the
Yeah.
story however you want. But
Um,
would this have been worth it?
no. And I
No
think that's
chance.
quite obvious. Because then like the story is he's there. Do you want him developing your next set of draft picks and free agent signings when you hasn't done that well already? And the scheme
Right.
you've already seen like doesn't work in terms of against good offenses. No.
Exactly. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to be a hater. You know what I'm saying? Like, calling for another man's job isn't cool, but I
No.
can't help but sit here and look at just the state of the Bears and say the true silver lining in this is that anybody inside that organization that was ardent, like in favor of Matt Eberflus, well, you just got to wear this one because
Yeah.
I said it enough on the pod. I'm really not trying to be a bleeding sheep, but like, there's not really any coming back from this. It's the second one, for crying out loud.
I
You
know.
normally don't get a first one. And here's a question that I got for you because I've seen it a couple times in the chat.
Hmm?
A lot of despair around George McCaskey not hiring the right guy. How are you feeling?
Oh no, no, I don't think he did. And
Not
um
that one about not hiring the right next guy. There's
oh,
there's a lot
George?
of it's the whole to be plain, people in the chat are saying,
Let me
well,
look.
what matters? Nothing matters. They're just going to screw it up again.
Yeah, I mean, that can always happen. I mean, I get that, but
Can.
he's not selling the team. He's always gonna be involved, but I would rather take my chances of rolling the dice and getting a different coach than staying with Eberflus. Like, I think that he's already shown you who he is. Like, there's no changing that in my opinion. Like, that's going with, like, John Fox for that extra year, going with Tressman for that extra year, going with Nagy for the extra year. Like, you already know what it is. Here's another question for you we didn't talk about on the pod. So we talked about Fields. I think he had a good game.
Hmm.
You think he had a good game, right? Did today change anything about how you would in terms of the debate of a rookie quarterback versus Fields?
You know, if to be honest with you, if Caleb Williams hadn't played his game against UCLA, it might have. But man, if the Bears do get the number one overall pick, that's a guy I'm just excited about. To be honest with you,
Mhm.
like there's all this stuff coming out, all this prospect fatigue. But to keep this in a tiny little nutshell, there's a lot of things I'm really excited about, and I want the coach. Long story short, I'm trying to just sit back on my haunches and say, I want Eberflus fired. Whatever the new coach wants to do, I'm down with.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean,
If the
I
coach,
think I'm excited about all three of them. Like if it's
exactly,
Fields, cool.
exactly,
If it's May,
and
cool. If it's Williams, cool.
I think there is a piece. Like I think Sir Lord just put it perfectly. I'm going to read what he
Yes,
said. He
he
said
did. Yeah.
it's a check mark to argue to keep Fields. There's many more to go.
Yes.
Absolutely, feather in the cap. One game does not make the entire argument yet.
Yep.
And so if that's what he looks like, if that's the consistency that you get from Justin Fields, we can build around this.
Right.
I mean, it would be a different build. I don't know how a second phenomenal receiver fits into it, but it can. Like
Well,
this looked more hurts than not, right?
yes. Well, it could be it also could be Brock Bowers too. You could be like, cool, we're gonna go two tight end fun stuff with run and play action and make it work. But like we talked about this all the scenarios last pod. Remember, like, okay, if Fields has this QB rating and this, then you're like, yeah, but what about the sacks? He only had the two, and like it was pretty
They were both
clean.
at
And
the end of
plus
the
he
game too.
added running too. Like it was to me, it was promising versus he did this off of again now you put his last four games together. Minnesota's the outlier. He's had three good games out of four. So it's like if he has the last six, is we're talking about, like he needs more to go. If four of those six are just like today, it might flip the script.
We'll see. We'll see. I mean,
Yeah.
the other piece to this is that Fields needs to not get hurt throughout the entire rest of the season. He needs
Mhm.
to finish the game, like you're saying, with a lot of consistency. And honestly, Nick, I don't know how the Bears lose all those games. If like the problem is that what Fields brought today was pretty solid. And so chances are you could easily go 4-3, even with today's result already chalked up in the loss column, right? And there's a point where you do start asking, like, okay, what do we have to do to win? Right. Khalid, I'm kind of with you. I'm not a fan of like the QB power sweeps. That's just me, Nick. You know it is.
I
Like,
like him.
and when they don't work, I'm sitting here like we just gave away for a free hit to our quarterback. But that doesn't mean it's entirely wrong. It's more just like I do think that there are some pieces like Donald to change gears just a little bit. Like you mentioned Bowers, Donald Gooch is in here mentioning Bowers, and I keep looking at all the tight ends that have been drafted really high recently and keep begging the question on, man, if you took Bowers at like pick number 9, what are the real chances he's going to live up to that compared to nearly any trench player, right? Like these coaches just don't get enough value out of tight ends taken that high. I know
Well,
somebody's still going to take him, OJ Howard, right?
Well, yeah, but then you look at you just paid Komet for years. So then if you draft a guy, are you gonna get the same value that you just paid out of Komet? Like so there is that differential. But I think Brock Bowers is again, we're always gonna say this. He's different, but he has multiple years of elite production, which you couldn't say for Kyle Pitts, for OJ Howard, for I think anyone else. I think he's the best tight end prospect we've seen.
I
And
mean,
I've done this for a while.
he's really, 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 really good, but then you have to trust a coach to get all that out of him, right?
That's also a point.
And
Yes.
that is what I don't trust. You got to realize a lot of this also comes down to the same way I talk about safeties, where it's like it's one thing to be a really good safety. It's another thing to be scheme independent enough for a coach to kind of use you wrong. Like Jalen Petrie played star at Baylor, and then he goes and now he plays like Lovey Tampa 2 deep safety, and he looked
Yes.
great. Like
Oh,
it's a
he's
completely
I
different
love him.
position,
Yeah.
but a lot of
Yep.
guys don't make that shift, you know?
Mhm.
And so to me, there's a whole lot of conversation left to play out, but we're just gonna have to give it time. I mean,
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
don't
And
know.
any other questions that the chat has before we wrap this up?
Let me see. Nothing. I'm looking through. We got some talk about like May, other people. What do you want to do at the top of the draft?
Well, here's a quick one for you.
Yeah,
So, we talked a little bit about this on the last pod of like, would you take a quarterback 3 over Fields, you know?
right.
Um, Jaden Daniels is making a case for quarterback 3, and he's very different in terms of like than he is versus McCarthy versus Penix versus Nix, because he can run and he has played like 'cause I had this notion of, and this is a fault of mine. Like I see how someone plays like Bo Nix at Auburn, I'd be like, never think about that guy again, and then they improve, right? And Jaden Daniels looks much better at LSU. I don't know if you've watched film on him yet, but in terms of he's still skinny, but he's strong, and he has made some really good throws this year to match with his athleticism. And oh, Jordan, yes, I have seen JJ McCarthy run, but JJ McCarthy, I mean, what's happened the last 2 weeks for JJ McCarthy, right? He was asked to throw and then didn't look great, I don't think, last week. I
If J
wonder if next week doesn't go well, if he actually doesn't come out.
I was actually about to say, I think if JJ McCarthy doesn't get a first round grade, then he's going to go back for his senior season, just
Yep.
based on the state of things. Now, it wouldn't surprise me if he's still going to end up picked in the first round, just because it's a quarterback needy league. And especially after you go Caleb and May, there are going to be plenty of people, or May and Williams, whatever order you want it to be.
Right.
There are going to be plenty of teams that are like, okay, but hang on, like I need to. I need a quarterback, and they're going to draft a 20-year-old kid who can throw rifles when he wants to.
Yeah.
I think the Penix question is really interesting because I think Penix had a decent game. I don't really care about the week to week stuff. Okay, is that bad? Like I don't actually let my stuff. I really try to work hard to make it to where it doesn't just drift up and down.
Mhm.
Why did I care about the Caleb game against UCLA? Here's why. It's because Caleb Williams has now made a show out of just taking as long as possible to throw the ball. And that stuff ain't going to work in the NFL. And everybody knows it.
Yep.
He goes up against UCLA, a team with a blatant series of mismatches all across the offensive line. I don't know if you watched any piece of this game, but it
Mm.
looked more NFL than I would argue nearly any game he's played this season. It's
Yeah.
still spread offense stuff, but he's got to dodge guys in the pocket and has to plan the way he's operating his offense around pressure nearly the entire game. And to me, you got a much better translational picture of in the NFL, what is it going to look like when his team is not playing for him? And it didn't look great on the score board, but 380 yards through the air on
Mhm.
44 attempts with only like 3 sacks, all of them in I wouldn't call them gotta have it, but all of the sacks either coming consecutively. He had 2 sacks back to back, or as the
Okay.
game was starting to slip out of hand. I thought it was a really strong performance because it showed us something we haven't seen. What
Mhm.
does Caleb do in a game where he's getting the snot hit out of him?
Yeah.
But with Penix, if you've seen what I've seen, there's a lot of similarity to me between Justin Fields and Michael Penix in the way that they play. Like longer release, pretty deep ball, natural throwing power, like outstanding players all over the place that he's throwing to. Not saying they're the same. It's more that I'm interested to see the way the league values him
Yeah.
because I don't think he's every offense's quarterback, and I know the league cares about that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think he's a little bit more of like I see him more as like a precision guy, like to be successful. And yeah, and Jordan mentioned this, and I would too. I mean, him coming from Indiana and then transferring to Washington, I mean, he's been beat up a lot with injuries. I'd also dump in my guy Latu, my favorite edge, like
Gosh,
his injuries.
outstanding
Well,
game.
we'll have to see about that. But the interesting thing about Caleb and about May that we need to bring up is both of them have had either turnover in the coaching staff, or turnover on the roster. And like last year, they were way more successful when there was better supporting cast, better in terms of coaching around them, and like they looked great. And they've had some adversity this year, and that's why I think like people are like, well, look, they didn't win against Georgia Tech, or hey, look at Caleb, look bad against whoever. It's like there's going to be a little up and down when the rest of it is a little messy, but that's kind of what the NFL's like because I think it was. I mean, when you have Josh Downs and you have, you know, Addison to throw to, like things are going to look pretty easy. So this is nice to see some adversity from them, and you want to see them kind of bounce back. That resiliency happens late in the game. You got to, win the game. Like you want to see that stuff from these young quarterbacks.
Oh, absolutely. But you also dealt with the cards you're dealt with. You know what I'm saying? Like the part that really frustrates me is that everybody cares a lot about the winning thing, and then all of a sudden you look at a lot of these quarterbacks that have had success in the league, and their college careers are completely random. I'm pretty sure Pat Mahomes' team didn't eclipse 500, and if they did, it wasn't by much in his final season at Texas Tech. Because when you're on a bad team, you're you're bad. You know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Well, I had this whole thing for a long time, and this is again, I hate ripping on people, but Cliff Kingsbury, okay? Every year he's been a head coach, Robert. Every year. He started off either decent or really good, and the end of the season, it's been a terrible collapse every single year. Like I mean, that has to be something within coaching, right? So I'll give an excuse to Patrick Mahomes on that one, considering the sample size of like 10 seasons that Cliff Kingsbury has had his team's nosedive. I'm gonna be like, well, I'll give you a pass there.
It's
But you're right,
hilarious.
because if you don't have, well, we talked about this in the podcast weeks ago. When your defense allows today for Fields to be 29 points, how many quarterbacks are going to score more than 29 points and win a game? Like the record is Patrick Mahomes is the only one that has a winning record when his defense gives up 24 or more points. Everyone else has a losing record. So, like, if Mahomes had that in college or anyone, like your defense has to give you some support or
Oh,
you'll lose.
sure. I mean, that's the other piece to this, right? Everybody keeps trying to take. We don't know how to talk about quarterback. And that's partially because we really struggle to evaluate quarterbacks. I mean,
Yep.
the Stroud we've seen in the NFL is not the same Stroud we saw
Oh
in
my
college football
gosh.
outside of one game. We saw it once, and it was the
Against
last one.
Carolina,
I
sadly.
you mean against Georgia?
Oh no, I know. Oh, sorry. I was talking NFL
No, I
against
I
Carolina, but
same difference. Same difference,
yeah.
honestly. Cuz yes, but instead you sit there and you look at it and it's like, "Oh man, we keep wanting to take quarterback and we want it to be the position that wins the game for your team. But also, it's not that simple. So is the winningest quarterback the best quarterback? Well, Sometimes, other times, Patrick Mahomes and Tom Brady didn't even start his senior season or whatever he got drafted, if memory serves. And I'm not 100% on these details, but it's more to say that, like, I don't know. I think that there are plenty of people where it's like they're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater one way or another. Like, for instance, Rory, I'm not trying to call you out, but you mentioned Caleb fumbles about as much as Fields. Yeah, but they play completely differently. Fumbles in the pocket when you're extending plays, I'm not trying to say that they're forgivable, but when you compound it with 40 combined touchdowns, I think you'll get over 8 fumbles and losing one this season. It super sucks when your quarterback keeps fumbling the ball. Let's not pretend it's a good thing. It's more that do the positives outweigh the negatives. When you compare that to a guy like Bo Nix, who's been in college football since I swear I've been born, like he's that latest guy where you're like, Bo Nix is still playing, right? But you compare him to a guy like Bo Nix, who's 25. Yeah, he's got a quick release. So does Tyson Bagent. Strong arm? Absolutely. So does Tyson Bagent. Throws with touch and good pocket poise. It sure helps when Oregon is really, really good. What you're looking at with Bo Nix is a quarterback 4 years further along than Drake May and Caleb Williams. And when you give Caleb Williams and Drake May 4 more years of developing time, I think you're going to start to see a lot of very similar polish, right? But that's
Bo Nix stinks. Bo Nix has been improved.
Bo Nix is
We have to
good.
give him that.
He
He
can
is much better.
You could live with both. He can be good. They can both be good.
Yep.
But you got to remember, because I think this is the hardest part for a lot of people. People want to see the player and they want to see instant success. These are junior quarterbacks in both
Yes.
cases. They're not seniors. So
Yep.
you're not getting Kenny Pickett. And even Kenny Pickett needed a year to adjust
Yep.
because he was a super senior, if memory serves.
Yeah, he was. He was. Well, you can throw McCarthy in there. He's a junior too.
Like, all of them are going to need time. They're
Mhm.
all going to need time to figure it out because they're super unpolished. They're 3 years younger than Justin Fields for very obvious reasons. And
Mhm.
so it's not like, I get it. If plenty of people, I would actually rather, Rory, that if you wanted quick release, like you wanted instant results, you wanted, I'm not saying you want instant results, but the Bears fans who want instant results, tell me you want to sign Kirk Cousins. I actually find that to be a more cohesive argument.
No.
If you're trying to upgrade at quarterback and get back to throwing from the pocket and letting your letting your playmakers win, that is a more realistic way to get instant improvement. Nick, I know you're out on it because you'd rather stick with Fields than
Yes.
pivot the offense altogether. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But if you're going to draft a quarterback, you're not drafting him for them to become Stroud. We'd love it, but you're not drafting them to do that. You're drafting them to become, I don't know about Kyler Murray, but like a good quarterback by their second year. But that's just my 2 cents. I
Yeah.
think Jaden Daniels is interesting, but I need to just like study him.
Yeah. Yeah, to me, like, all of this is when you look at, like, Mahomes has struggled a little bit this year. You look at the quarterbacks that have had some struggles, but the quarterbacks that have had successes, you have to surround them. And, like, Chicago has that, whether they go rookie or not, I mean, Komet's, I mean, solid. I'll say good. I
Right.
know, obviously the QB school doesn't like him, but I like Cole Kmet. Um, but to me, I think it says a lot more about getting that other receiver. Now, again, I would love if it was Harrison, but I also love Malik Neighbors, who's a DJ Moore clone. I also love Keon Coleman, who is an absolute freak. Keon Coleman light would be the Brian Thomas from LSU isn't a bad guy either. You could get him maybe, if you trade down. Um, there's a few other ones. I mean, you told the two Washington guys aren't bad. Troy Franklin's not bad. Like, this is a very good wide receiver class, everybody. There's about, I would say, 6 guys that have a chance of going round 1. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
Xavier Legette, Jordan. Yep, he's a little uh, physical athlete, I would call him. You have, I mean, you want to go third round. Malachi Corley is a little Debo Samuel like. Shout out Western Kentucky again. Like, if you want to add some playmakers around either Fields or a rookie quarterback, we have the opportunity to do that. And for the love of everything, Ryan Poles, surround your young quarterback so he has a chance. Because we saw how epically bad it was for Fields not to have anybody. No matter who we go with at quarterback, surround them.
Oh yeah. And we'll just have to wait and see what happens. For now, I gotta run. Nick, thank you so much for joining. Bears
All right, man.
fans, thank you so much for tuning in. be on this channel, 8 p.m. Tuesday night. We're going to go through the film. We're going to talk about what changed when I rewatched it. We're going to show you one way or another. It'll be something, that's for sure, because this one is going to be a tough one to relive, but at least it's fun for the majority of the game. So until then, thanks so much. Bear down. Thanks so much